Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Dr. JoQueta Handy is a speaker, author, educator, and integrative medicine practitioner who is opening new pathways to educate children with learning disabilities. Dr. Handy's methodology is a result of extensive research showing that learning disabled individuals are, in fact, exceptional in their capability to learn. They can be especially gifted in visual learning and are capable of reaching astonishing levels of potential if they are educated in an appropriate way. Dr. Handy has developed a holistic strategy that begins with nutritional protocols and progresses to employ the specialized visual and kinesthetic strategies that can leverage these individuals' unique and tremendous strengths. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I am so happy to be with you today. This is great.
I'm very excited that my colleague Mark Haddis introduced us, and I'm looking forward to hear more about what you do. Could you start us off by telling us about how you got into the work you're doing and what drives your passion for it?
For sure. So my company is, well, I have several. The way I met Mark was through Brilliant Blends, and that is an adaptogen-based company. And the way that I got started in doing that is from 30 years of working with autistic children and their families. My master's degree was in speech language pathology. Then from working the very first, I guess, pretty much right out of grad school, I went to New York and was working on a government grant with LOVOS, which is now called ABA. And we were sent into Borough Park, Brooklyn, and working with families with children in the 0 to 3 range. And these babies were they were so sick. And this was the early 90s, 92, had no idea what was wrong with them. And they were saying, this is autism. And I really don't remember learning about autism in grad school. I went to BU, Boston University, and maybe I don't know, wasn't paying attention or something that day. But I just saw these babies and this parent struggling so much. And all that they were doing at that time, all these parents had were these giant bottles of vitamin B, Kirkman Labs of vitamin B. And they were saying, this is just a B vitamin deficiency. Well, of course it wasn't. And I knew that wasn't right, but I didn't know why it wasn't right. And so I'd always had a passion for nutrition and started going back in and taking classes in nutrition, natural medicine, got my first certification in 1994 to work as a naturopath. And I began incorporating that into my practice. And in 96, moved to California and was partnering with a child development specialist and began seeing more autistic children and families. And my passion had always been to see the children be successful in the classroom. So I was combining nutrition, using supplementation, herbs, vitamins, a lot of different things, and working with sensory integration training, language development. I ended up building 5 different schools for children with autism and their families, again, around my passion of seeing them be successful in the way that I believed that they could learn the best. We called it brilliant learning because my philosophy was always that every child is a brilliant learner. We just need to step back and let them show us how they learn best. So from there, right now, and we moved into the pandemic, and I had been obsessed with the Johns Hopkins research, James Fadiman's research out of Stanford for like 4 years. And they were all working with psilocybin. and having, the background with autistic children and that gut-brain connection, but most of all, how do we work on that sensory system and with the brain and around brain chemistry? So just became kind of obsessed with learning more about psilocybin and psychedelics and how they work with the brain. And when the pandemic hit, I started seeing more and more children, teenagers in my practice who had tried to commit suicide, who were labeled with medication-resistant depression. And that's even in some circles considered a fatal diagnosis. And I was just like, this is unbelievable. This level of stress that we're seeing, this level of psychotropic drugs that these teenagers and young people are being given. And that was one of the things in my background with autism. A lot of autistic children don't do well with medication. And so we have to think outside of the box and use other tools. And so that's, where I had spent 30 years in working. And so I just felt like I have to do something. What can I do? Psilocybin isn't legal. And so I worked on two different formulations called Adapt and Thrive, started a company called Brilliant Blends that is 100% legal. Adaptogen blends. Adapt is all around reducing anxiety, calmness, memory. I wanted to honor what autistic children have taught me. They have been my greatest teachers. They have changed the way that I practiced. They changed the way that I think I look at human beings. And so in honoring them, Adapt is all the most researched adaptogens for ASD children. But what works for an ASD child works for everybody. ASD children are just here to teach us what we're doing wrong, which they've clearly done with our food, our medicine, our environment. And so that is Adapt. And then Thrive is all around honoring their parents. 50% of the parents with an ASD child, with a special needs child, have PTSD. And so Thrive is all around mood elevation, energy level, focus and attention, and again, works for everyone. So that's where I am today, and in a nutshell, how I got here. And it has definitely been a wonderful journey.
So when you say Adapt and Thrive, as you say it sounds like two separate products. And are they vitamin formulations? Do they have more than just vitamins in them? What is it that you're referring to when you say Adapt and then Thrive?
Sure. So both of them are adaptogen blends. So they are a mushroom blend. So we're layering or stacking things like lion's mane, chaga, reishi, ashwagandha, bacopa. Bacopa is not a mushroom, but so some nootropics and mushrooms as a way of working with brain enhancement, working with the immune system, with the digestive system, so that gut-brain connection. They also, in those clinical situations where we can use microdosing, they work beautifully when we use microdoses of psilocybin with those mushroom blends.
Age range and target symptom patterns, what are you dealing with there?
So with just straight adaptogen blends of Adapt and Thrive, right now I'm using that with as young as a 3-year-old autistic child that had high anxiety, was chewing his nails down till they bled, not sleeping, having lots of issues with constipation, not eating, throwing up. So Adapt has been amazing, and it works like within 10 minutes of giving it. And so just opening up the capsule, adding it to a smoothie for him. And then all the way up to my 88-year-old mother-in-law, who is suffering from a lot of stress, and caring for my father-in-law, who's 93 and has dementia. And she had reached out and just, saying, I'm very stressed, had developed some skin eczema issues around the stress, not able to sleep, enlarged liver, and medically they couldn't find anything wrong with her. So began using Adapt and Thrive with her. She even noticed she's got a great memory, but she thinks that she doesn't. She even reported increased memory. We've seen a wonderful research around Alzheimer's disease and how adaptogens can help in that area. So across the gamut, from 3 years of age to 88 years old, are is taking the product right now.
And then with your work, is it simply giving the product, or do you do are you still doing the speech work? Are you still doing the behavioral work?
That's it. That's a great question. So for 16 years, I've used quantum biofeedback scanning. So where we hook up electrodes, we're scanning the body for frequencies that relate to stress. Our body shows stress way before it ever goes into a disease state. And so I've used that for about 16 years. I started using it with autistic children. It really became their voice because I've always worked with the severe end of autism, the nonverbal, aggressive, self-injurious. And like one example, I had a child who was 9 years old. Mom had gone out and done a therapy, a very specific therapy that had cost $4,000. And she didn't have the money to have spent that $4,000 on the therapy. And she came in on a Monday morning, was so upset and was like, I just wasted $4,000 again. Billy's worse than he's ever been. And I don't know what's wrong. And when we ran the scan on him, Billy had pica, and he was obsessed with her cosmetics. And I said, when did he eat lotion? And she's like, Friday night. And I said, it's his stomach. It's just from the stomach lining is irritated. So addressed that. A couple of days, Billy was back, and it wasn't that the therapy was bad. The therapy was wonderful for him, the program, and he was right back in, receiving the benefits that he had gotten from the therapy. And so had we not had this device, I think it's very possible that we could have just written it off as, he's a severe autistic child, and what do you expect? And mom would have lost hope, and he wouldn't have gotten the benefit of the therapy and also been in pain. So this is a system that I've used across the board with all of my patients. I continue to use that now, both from a therapeutic as well as a assessment side, a training side, looking at, training the body from a stress aspect, and also looking at where is the body responding to stress. And so the other thing that we're using is I love what James Fadiman, his research, he's, over 40 years of research in looking at psychedelics, and what he talks about is the pill with the skill. And so even though we're using non-psychedelics of Adapt and Thrive, it's still so important to put that skill with the pill. So working with my patients around breath work. With breath work, I say it's like exercise. If you don't like it, you're not going to do it. So I give them several different options and then say, okay, which one works best for you? We use breath work. We're using a lot of course, natural medicine tools like infrared sauna, meditation, yoga, partnering with a medical yogi. He's amazing. So taking yoga stretching and combining that with where pain and inflammation is in the body. exercise, and of course, diet being very important. But putting all of those tools together, along with, of course, using other supplementation that might be needed, just simple vitamin and mineral deficiencies, amino acids, but really focusing on the adaptogens to help with brain enhancement.
So I'm very curious about, you were talking about this energy scan that you do. Can you name that again?
Sure. It's called, the big name is called quantum biofeedback. I use a software made by Mandalay, which their US office is in Michigan. Their main office is in Budapest. And then there's several versions of quantum biofeedback. I actually have 3 systems that we run pretty much all day long at the same time. And that's like a common name that a lot of people know when they hear that is Skio. That was one of the original versions. And I have an Eductor version and an Indigo version.
And so,
I'm sorry, Quest. I did have Indigo, Quest 9 and Eductor.
So what is the procedure like? How much, I'm thinking in terms of these autistic individuals, what do you have to put on the body, or how close do they have to be to it? What's the actual mechanism like?
So our post-COVID, our COVID-friendly version right now is using what's called an orgone generator. So it looks like a big bullet's going to shoot you, but it just has crystals and it goes out 40 feet. It's an amplification device, and it has been, I love it. I like it better than the 12 electrodes that we used to hook up to the body around the head, the wrist, and the ankles. And a lot of my autistic kids didn't like that to begin with.
I can imagine.
So this has been, this is the orgone generator has been great. I really enjoy using that. And then that generates, once we run the scan, that generates a 30-page digital report. And in my office, I run 2 screens so that the client can see exactly what I'm seeing. And we go through that 30-page report together. I take notes on it for them. Even though the report's very comprehensive at 30 pages, it doesn't have everything. And so we also go and just look at other areas of stress that the body is showing. And so that is all put in a note page for them. From there, we can also do muscle testing. The system is amazing, way better at muscle testing than I am. I think I doubt myself too much, but we can, then also look at test against what came up as stress points in their body and what a supplement, the ingredients of a supplement, and find out what is the best solution to work on this issue and how much should we give. Like I just, before this podcast, had a 25-year-old female in my office who had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. She was doing everything that Western medicine had told her to do, and she was getting worse. And what the highest stress points that came up for her were around parasite overgrowth. And so that's what we're going to move forward and treat for her. But I was able to look at exactly, what would be, do we need to use an essential oil parasite detox? Do we need to use a homeopathic? Do we need to use an herbal detox? And so we were able to, look by brand, by type, and know which one would be the best for her body.
Excellent. So that reminds me of several people that I've worked with over the years, a couple of people I've interviewed for Journey's Dream this past year and a half, who talk about having wonderful results after their patients have expired everything that conventional medicine would throw at them and get worse or no improvement. And then they discover when they start testing for it that they've got a parasite or they've got a mold toxicity or something. And it's a matter of removing the toxins and or the parasites before the body can start to regenerate and start to heal itself.
Exactly. Yes. And that's one of the things I think is so important, like when right now, when we're hearing so much about microdosing, especially in the mental health arena, it's very popular, and they're saying it's going to possibly take the place of medication, which I think could be a good thing because I don't think medication's working that well. But it's looking, not everybody is ready just to dive into that. And so we want to look at the health of the person and really see, where is that level of health first? What is that? Just like what you were saying, what is that level of toxicity? Do we need to clean this up first? What is their diet? If their diet's loaded with white sugar, then we're not going to get the benefit and the change that we want. So looking at that whole person, that skill with the pill, I think is so important. I think using plant medicine is an amazing thing that God has given us, and used in the right way, it can really be a huge life changer. Used in the wrong way, just like anything else, we're not going to see the benefits. Even though it can't be harmful, we're not going to see the benefits that could come from this amazing plant.
Well, and one of the things that has been a pattern, it's in our current conventional allopathic medicine, we look at a list of symptoms and then we throw something at it to try and knock out the symptom, without looking at what's that system or that symptom an aspect of, what's the cause within the organism from a systemic point of view. And I've understood that people, even if they're trained in some of the most wonderful natural remedies, can, if you're just adopting that conventional approach of what do I have in my toolkit that'll knock out that symptom, you're missing the issue of finding what's at the cause, what's out of balance in the system. And you can be doing a covering up of the cause by simply squashing symptoms, even if you're using the most healthy supplements you've got. And that's why I like the approach of being able to diagnose. And you have one where you're talking about, the quantum biofeedback. So you're looking at the system cause and saying, okay, we've got something that's way out of whack here. How do we correct that? And then if the symptoms still persist, then we can work on them.
Yes, exactly. And again, the body doesn't make mistakes. I mean, even if we have high blood pressure, and we're like, well, how is that, a positive thing? How is that not a mistake? There's a reason why that body needs to increase pressure. And so that's it. That what we need to look at, just like the 25-year-old that I was mentioning, she's on steroids and antidepressants and anti-seizure medications. And I'm like, okay, you don't have any of these issues, but it was like, but I have pain and inflammation. Okay, let's try and work on the parasitic condition. And there's even looking at parasites. We know that our parasites carry Lyme-like bacteria. You won't ever test positive on a Lyme test, but you can have all the symptoms of having Lyme's disease just from an overgrowth of parasites. And so that was one of the things that came up on her as a high stress level, was a Lyme-like bacteria. Dr. McDonald in 2016 went before Congress and said, this is a real problem that we're seeing from parasitic overgrowth. And what he was seeing in autopsies, he was looking at it, or what took him to look at, perform the autopsies, was from brain tumors. And he really felt that glioblastoma brain tumor, he was seeing a high correlation between starting with a parasitic overgrowth and Lyme-like bacteria from that parasitic overgrowth.
So when you have someone like this 25-year-old you're mentioning, and you've got a parasitic overgrowth, what's the course of treatment like in terms of time? How long to clear up a parasitic overgrowth like that?
I would do a two-step. We're actually going to do a 2-week parasitic detox using a homeopathic, and the homeopathics that I use are from Europe. I've just had much better luck with those than ones from the US. And so using a homeopathic parasitic detox, and then we're going to follow that up after 2 weeks with an 8-week Lyme detox. So all in all, we're talking about 10 weeks, but she should start to see significant improvement and reduction in pain and inflammation in the next 6 weeks, would be my guess.
So is this quantum biofeedback device that you have, is it commonly used? I don't think I've heard that particular brand or type before. Do you know many other practitioners that use it?
Not as many in the US, but it is fully FDA approved as a level 2 biofeedback device. But here in the US, we aren't allowed to use it as in our hospitals. It's used in 17 other countries, and they use it as a full-blown medical device. When I went to Budapest in 2019 and was there with doctors from all over Europe, it was amazing to see the difference in the way that it's being used there. And, I was one of the only ones that wasn't an MD or a psychiatrist. It was used a lot in psychiatry within their hospitals, and Spain was I would think probably France and Spain were the two biggest recognized countries there at this conference that were using the device. And it was all doctors, medical clinics.
So does this particular device, I think you said this, but does it use part of it for diagnostic and part of it for treatment?
Yes. So in the FDA, we're not allowed to say diagnostic or treatment, but we can say training and looking at stress. In other countries, they can use those terms. But yes, we have to say that it's training the body.
First it can areas of identify the area of stress, and then it can train the body to balance that out.
Yeah.
So you'll have multiple sessions with it after you've identified the areas of stress to help the patient's body get trained to deal with that stress differently. Correct. And another part that I think is really amazing is it's based on largely based on Chinese medicine, Eastern medicine. So in Chinese medicine, it says for every disease state, there's an emotion that is linked to that. Like, for instance, we know the liver is very much around anger and fear when we have liver inflammation or a liver problem. There's a doctor here in Orange County, California, where I am, and she's right now she's seeing 48 new cancer patients a day. She is an MD, but she treats at a center where they use more alternative methods. And she was telling me, had the wonderful opportunity to run a scan on her a couple of weeks ago. And she was saying the first thing she does with her cancer patients is say, we need to look at fear and anger in your body and the emotional side before I can ever help you medically. And in Europe, that's one of the primary ways they say if for any disease state you're going to work on, 50% of it needs to be addressing the emotions. And here in the US, I think we forget that so much. Let's just give you a pill and go on your way, you'll be fine. And so again, I think as we move into using more plant medicines, as we're seeing them be legalized in Oregon and in different cities in the US right now, I think it's so important to look at the methods that we're using with these patients. And I think there's going to be a big rethink just in psychiatric medicine. I hope there is, in mental health. Well, there's a groundswell that's going. And hopefully it will grow. It's certainly not coming from the top down, because that entire field has been aligned with and trained by the medical model to chase the symptoms, the pharmaceutical approach.
It is. What's really interesting right now, if you look at the stocks are kind of going crazy, even though it's not legalized. They have a patent on the idea, which I did not know that you could do. But the top 5 stocks right now in the psychedelics are in the pharma with big pharma from pharmaceutical companies. So again, I think our model needs to change to match that, and hopefully it will, instead of crashing and burning. But yeah, our pharmaceutical companies are definitely moving forward in a different way. Not sure how it's going to end up, but.
So if you think about, this, when somebody does a search for JoQueta Handy, you get all kinds of results. What is it, something about an aspect of your work that we haven't even touched on yet that you want to make sure we put in this interview? What, you do a lot of different things. What aspect of your work do you want to talk about?
I mean, I really am. I think plant medicine is one of our best medicines right now, and one of an untapped resource. And I so want to provide the education versus just people who are going out and trying it and experimenting with it. Because again, it is an amazing plant used in the right way. And one of the biggest, like our executives right now are, looking at, they're one of the most curious in the group. And so again, instead of just, a brain enhancement to work harder, work longer, I think what we really need is education around how do we make this world better? How do we make it more beautiful? How do we come together as a community versus just, I'm just using this to advance in my career. With our patients who aren't, who are having to take medication right now, educating them on a way that, there are some alternatives, but I don't necessarily think that comes from just sitting in a therapy session, not in any way to put down a therapist and the amazing work that they're doing. But when we're working with plant medicine, it is a little bit different. And it's not just, oh, okay, sorry, your hour's up, let's go. And again, not just giving it as a pill, putting the skill with it. And when we can combine it with amazing things like breath work, really learning how to control and work with the nervous system, exercise, diet, I think we're going to see some amazing changes. So on that end, mybrilliantblends.com is the website that has information not only about myself. The company was started with my son, Zach, who is almost 25 years old, and it came from hands-on, living this with Zach. He had cranial synostosis when he was born, which just means that 2 out of the 3 soft spots or fontanelles in his brain were fully fused. So the brain had no place to grow. So at 5 weeks of age, he had a full craniotomy. They made 11 incisions into Zach's head, and they split it like an eggshell. So I don't know if that had a bearing. Zach's always had a hard time from an emotional standpoint. And when he was about 15, he started having problems with insomnia, depression. It worsened when he got to college, suicidal thoughts, some very dark times. And so when COVID hit, he took a nosedive, was laid off from his job, a girlfriend that brought some pain. And so I said, hey, Zach, let's give this a try. So I didn't even tell my husband that I was doing this. He's a chiropractor. He's a doctor also. And Zach came into our office and he was like, "What are you doing with him?" And I'm like, "Why?" And he was like, "He's just different. And he's empathetic. He has a better awareness of what's going on around him." I think the empathy was one of the biggest things. And so when I shared with them, I said, "Well, we're doing some adaptogens. We're doing breath work. We've got Zach's diet changed and some exercise." So it was during COVID. We were all together, so I could really oversee the situation. But it was amazing in just a week's time. And it made such an impression on Zach that he has continued then on his own to maintain the skill. And so when last October, we started this company together because Zach's a wonderful spokesperson. He's hands-on. He's like, "I've lived this. I can tell you what it does for me on a daily basis." And it's been a wonderful, him being able to share with other 20 plus year olds of, this is how it changed my life. And the story has helped them. So, My Brilliant Blends is our newest project, and where I really want to help people as much as possible. I will always work with autistic families and children. They're my heart. And so we have Brilliant Learning Online, which is for parents and just helping with education questions and issues that you may have about your child, how to recognize that brilliant learner in every child. So that one's my passion. MyBrilliantBlends.com is our company, and again, what we really want to help in just in education and providing the need.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to meet with us today. I know you're quite busy, and I look forward to following up. I have in my own caseload, several people who are on the spectrum and the families that struggle with that. We're always looking for good supplementation, and I'll be directing several people your way. And I'm going to look into that quantum biofeedback device. That's a delightful addition in terms of trying to identify where stressors are and then help the body learn to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yes. And figure out that right solution. Taking the place of muscle testing. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight, and I look forward to our next contact.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. It was a great pleasure.
Dr. JoQueta Handy is a speaker, author, educator, and integrative medicine practitioner who is opening new pathways to educate children with learning disabilities. Dr. Handy's methodology is a result of extensive research showing that learning disabled individuals are, in fact, exceptional in their capability to learn. They can be especially gifted in visual learning and are capable of reaching astonishing levels of potential if they are educated in an appropriate way. Dr. Handy has developed a holistic strategy that begins with nutritional protocols and progresses to employ the specialized visual and kinesthetic strategies that can leverage these individuals' unique and tremendous strengths. Dr. Handy has embarked in a life and professional mission to bring this understanding and capability to parents, educators, and special needs organizations and governments worldwide. In addition to her book titled Brilliant Learning, national articles, and keynote presentations, Dr. Handy is in the midst of a national study on the issues of educating the learning disabled, and she speaks frequently about her experiences and her findings. In presentations, she addresses the following groups: parents and educators, parental support organizations, special needs education program faculty and administrators, home education program users, state and national governments and their health and education divisions, special needs associations, and action groups addressing autism spectrum disorder and Down syndrome disorder.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.